Hello, Charles. Hello, Bob.
Hello. I
I
will not
have,
be on the, I'm sorry, I won't be on the video today because the lighting here is just god awful. So,
okay.
Aw.
That's why they make candles.
Yeah.
all right. So here we go. Let's take a look here. I don't know. It's not too good.
I have 301, so I'm going to let you get started, Doug.
Oh my God, that lighting is god awful.
It's behind
It's like
you.
the Twilight Zone.
It is. It's like you got this aura around you, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that would be nice.
Whatever.
just in a-
Yeah.
I got to get a better spot, but so sorry.
Let me introduce you to one Robert Fritz. He shows up and he's got an amazing aura around him. Nobody
Right.
could figure out what it was. Then he closed the curtain and his aura went away.
If you close the curtain behind you, Bob, it could be a lot better.
I don't think it's going to work.
Or
That was a
leave your
good Rod
head right
Serling.
there. If you leave your head right there, it blocks that sunlight.
Exactly.
Don't move.
What we'll find out is he's going to take a screenshot and then post the screenshot.
Yeah, right.
Well, knowing that I have some seasoned veterans on
Uh-oh.
here today, originally what I had planned to cover for today's session was some of the neuro-linguistic programming pieces and my favorite exercise, one of my favorite exercises in the whole world, the best listener, worst listener piece. But I don't know how many of that kind of stuff would be helpful to you on the call. So I want to make sure I'm giving you stuff that's going to be meaningful to you, since you're giving me an hour of your time today.
I don't know that I'm familiar with the best listener, worst listener exercise. One would think with my many
You
years.
should be, Linda. If you aren't, then maybe, I mean, it's worth it.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
That's for a plug, Doug.
It's
Yeah.
a wonderful setup. David, are you familiar with it? Cleveland, do you know where it's going? Oh, Patrice.
I'm looking
All right.
looking forward to it. Okay.
All right. So
Anything you
They
come
can-
with, I know it's worth listening to.
well, I got to admit, I got this one from Ray a gazillion years ago. This was in the old days of monthly training sessions. So I'm going to ask you 6 questions, but I do want you to play along, and I want you to write out your own answers, because it'll be much more powerful if you do. So question number 1 is simply, if you think of the best listener that you know personally, how do you know when somebody's listening to you? If you will go ahead and write out your answers to that question, please. Good afternoon, Kim. Good afternoon, Kim. We'll try this one more time. Good afternoon, Kim.
Hello.
We are working on question number 1. If you will write out your answer to how do you know when someone's listening to you. Steve, welcome. We're writing out our answers to these 6 questions. We're doing them one at a time. First question is, how do you know think of the world's best listener, or the best listener that you know personally. How do you know when someone's listening to you? So if you'll jot your own notes down on that one, please.
So Doug, I do it a little bit differently because I think question number 1 is think of the person and imagine that person, and so they can identify someone that they know. And I say that because when you go to the later part of the exercise, it's very easy to come up with somebody who's an atrocious listener.
Are you trying to get ahead of me, Tom?
No, I just wanted, I think that, this is, continuous improvement from the time Ray did it, whatever. I believe question number one is, who do you know that is a particularly good listener? Can you think of someone? Can you envision that person and force them to think of, to pick a person? That's all. Now I'll shut up.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Doug, do we respond in the chat box?
No, just on your own, on whatever piece of paper, papyrus, or electronic medium you want to capture it in. And then question number 2 is, when they are listening to you, how does that make you feel? And when you finish your answer, just look up and I'll go from there, except for Bob. And Bob, if you want to put a thumbs up instead or something like that, I understand.
I'm good.
Got it? Kim, I may need you to mute. Question number 3 is, how does their listening make you feel toward them? Now, to Tom's point, think of somebody who is a hellacious listener, worst listener ever, that you can kind of get in your mind's eye. How do you know when someone's not listening to you? All right, it looks like the pens and pencils and keyboards are slowing down a little bit. Question number 2 or question number 5 or question number 6, if you started out where Tom started, and that's, how does their not listening make you feel? And question number last, how does their not listening make you feel toward them? All right. At this point, if you'll just pop yourself all off of mute for a second. Wendy, I'm assuming you're playing along on this. Just so I'm going to start with Bob, and I'm going to go in backwards order based on my screen.
All right.
Bob, how do you feel how do you know when someone's listening to you?
Well, that could be a loaded question, but I will just say that I know because someone that is not focused, that they're quiet, their eyes dart, their questions back to you are incongruous with what you've been talking about.
This is question number 1. How do you know when someone is listening to you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Because they're focused, they tend to be quiet. and they you can see their eye contact is following along with you. You get a nod, you get some nonverbal input that shows that they're in touch with what you're doing.
Got it. Steve, same question.
I put body language, so some level of acknowledgement of what's being said. Also eye contact.
Got it. Kim?
The same, body language, nodding of the head, eye contact.
Patrice?
I put eye contact, body gestures, quiet and absorbing.
Chaz?
Everyone's covered it. Eye contact, open posture, they ask good questions, and you see visual response, reactions to what you're saying.
Got it. David, anything else?
They're validating your question, and the best is when they give right away excellent direct feedback that makes you think that the questions that you ask resonates.
Thank you. Queen? Linda?
Yeah, oh, really? Okay. Yes, absolutely eye contact, but a little more than eye contact is that they have tunnel vision.
Cleveland?
The only thing I would add is in terms of the nonverbal is that they stop whatever they're doing. There's no multitasking going on. It's 100% undivided attention.
Thanks. Tom?
Locked in, undistracted. Perhaps ask you to clarify if there's a need.
And Wendy?
Pretty much covered everything I had on my list.
Since so many of you mentioned body language, let's talk about where does the verticality of the head need to be? That's a question.
Up and straight up and down?
Yeah, straight ahead.
Anything except straight up and down.
Huh.
When somebody's listening to you, remember the old RCA Victor dog? When somebody's listening to you, their heads are almost always off center, ever so slightly. If you're talking to a group of people, if you're doing a talk and every head is straight, lights are on, nobody's home. They're going through the motions of listening to you. It's fascinating when it literally is fascinating when I'm on Zoom calls. I can really tell who's processing the information and who's kind of going through the motions, pretending they're listening. Question number 2. Wendy, I'm going to ask you to get us started. How does that make you feel when you're dealing with a best listener?
It makes me feel, physically it makes me feel good, feel appreciated, and I'm going to say validated, but I don't necessarily mean validated that I'm right. I could be wrong, but that they're truly listening to what was being said.
Thanks. Tom, and then Cleveland.
Honored.
Thanks. Cleveland?
Yeah, I would say like I'm not wasting my time. What I'm saying is of value. Yeah, that's about it.
Linda, what do you want to add?
Like I'm the only person in the room.
Oh, cool.
Great.
David?
You're right on. That's exactly where it is. You've got a good feeling, you're feeling good. It's the reverse will happen the other way. All positive.
Charles?
Yeah, I'd energized. I think I'm a little more alert to what's going on when they're being listened. I'm more open to feedback, to being questioned.
Got it. Thanks. Patrice?
I put that I'm open and understood.
Appreciate that. Kim and Steve, and then Robert.
Yeah, same, appreciated, and I did use the word validated, which I think Dave mentioned earlier.
I had respected and valued.
And Robert?
A lot of what was said, but the words I wrote down were important, trusted, knowledgeable. They make me feel confident and engaged.
Thank you so much. David, I'm going to start with you for question number 3. How does their listening make you feel toward them?
Exceedingly respectful, wanting to continue the dialogue, and very positive.
Thank you. Linda, and then Cleveland, and then Tom.
Very favorable.
Cleveland?
Yeah, it makes you, yeah, I would go the favorable, important, caring.
Tom?
Connected.
Wendy? You're on mute.
Sorry, I kind of have everything that you've talked about. It makes me enjoy talking with them is the one thing I don't think was mentioned.
Got it. Charles, Patrice, Kim, Steve, and Robert.
I'll add grateful.
Oh, wow.
To the mix. Yeah.
Patrice?
And I have connected. It makes me feel connected to that person through the subject.
Got it. Kim?
Patrice just took mine. That was the only other word I had that no one mentioned. Connected.
Got it. Steve?
I said makes me feel closer to them, willing to share more, and wanting to keep engaged.
Thanks. And Robert?
Makes me feel that they are more likable, that they are trusted, and I think most of all that they're intelligent because they're the lights are on.
They're smart enough to listen to you, right?
That's right, darn it.
that was just way too good of a setup. I
know. As he was uttering those words, I went, "Oh, so
geniuses if they just keep quiet."
They're very smart because they're listening to you, Bob.
Exactamundo. Exactamundo. Linda, think of somebody that is a voracious listener. Get us started when, how do you know when someone's not listening to you?
They're looking at their phone. They're looking around the room. What else did I write down? Oh, and there's no response via body language.
Or certainly not an appropriate response, right?
Well, yeah, there's that, yeah.
David?
Anything but focused to you. They're looking away, they're looking beyond, they're looking to the next person, they're yaying you to death, or there's just a glazed look.
So glazed is certainly one thing. One of the things we probably ought to talk about is, since everybody's mentioned eye contact, at some point before we leave this exercise, we got to talk about the cultural impact of eye contact. Because otherwise, I think that we could be doing ourselves a disservice if we're not careful. Charles?
Yeah, more than just unconnected, I think that they welcome interrupts from the outside. They're actually, if it's the worst listener, they're actually doing some other task, like fiddling with something on their desk, or maybe even doing email.
Got it. Patrice?
I put kind of like the same thing. They're not focused. They're lost in space is what I put.
Got it. Got it. Kim, Steve, and Bob?
Multitasking. Yep.
Steve?
Everything that I had, everything that's been said, not focused and multitasking.
Bob?
Yeah, lost my place here. Looks away, no facial expressions, wandering eye, bad follow-up questions. Sometimes, their comment might be completely separated from what you're talking about.
Yeah, totally.
And no recognition of like, oh, gotcha, and then go on to something else. Just go on to something else.
Yeah, total disconnection.
But Doug, I've also had the situation where somebody that I was speaking to was responding and going, yeah, and they had, if you asked them to repeat what you just said, they would have no clue.
So they were pretending they were listening.
They were pretending they were listening.
That's a different course.
Yeah.
Cleveland or Tom or Wendy, do you have anything that you want to add that we haven't covered yet?
Interrupt you.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I was about to say. They interrupt you, they cut you off, or they just flat out talk over you when you can't hear someone when you're talking.
So these last two questions, questions 5 and 6, or 6 and 7, or 6 and 7 and 8, depending on whose numbering system you used here. But the question is, how does their not listening make you feel, and how does their not listening make you feel towards them? Let me hear both of your answers on that one. And Kim, I'm going to start with you on this one. How does their not listening make you feel, and how does their not listening make you feel toward them?
Makes me feel unimportant, a lack of respect, and I used one word on the last one, very distanced.
Got it. Steve?
It's that I put down feeling not important and not valued. And my feelings toward them is that I have very negative feelings, and I don't want to continue to actually ever have a conversation with them.
I got it. Bob, and then up to Patrice.
Okay. I would feel small or even marginalized in a conversation when someone's not listening. And on the other hand, my feelings towards them are, similar to what I just heard: contempt, and in some cases, pity.
Oh, okay. Patrice?
Unappreciated and wasting my time.
Charles?
One step away from snapping their neck, and I would feel discounted and mistrusting.
There you go. David?
Yeah, on one spectrum, you're at, screw them, and you're really upset, and then you want to get on and move on. But there is a 20% of me that says there's something going on in their life that may be causing the way they're behaving towards you. So if it is, you want to find that window to find out maybe it's just a timing issue and get around it that way.
Seek first to understand, huh? Linda?
That's true.
Yeah, kind of feeling very neglected and unimportant, as people have said. But then my feelings towards them is that they don't really care about me. I would liken it to being in a networking event where, you're talking to somebody and your brain is going, well, they don't give a royal, what, and let me out of here.
Yeah. Got it. Cleveland?
Yeah, wasting my time and energy, and the way it makes me feel toward them, that if I'm not worth their time, then maybe they're not worth mine.
I hear you. Tom?
So I would just repeat: disrespected, unappreciated. And David, I'm admire that there's 20% of you, because with these people, there's only about 2% of me that wants to try to understand.
Got it. Wendy?
I think it's all been covered.
Survey says, here's the 2 words you can take to the bank. Angry and pissed off are the most popular words in 30 years of doing this exercise.
Wow.
You guys were so much more polite than almost everybody else that I work with on this particular exercise.
So Doug, there's another question in here.
Uh-oh.
There's 2 more questions in here, but go ahead, Tom.
Well, and I may be jumping this and stealing your, but I can't help
Not
it.
steal his thunder, Tom.
So, when have you been this person?
Well, I'm going to ask you I was going to ask a variation on that theme. And the next question is, who in your life, I've got a couple actually, who in your life would describe you as the best listener? And who in your life, and this is question number 8 or 12, depending on whose version you're using, but the next 2 questions are, who in your life would describe you as the world's best person or best listener? Who in your life would describe you as the world's worst listener? And yes, they can in fact be the same person. Hello, George.
Hello.
We're just wrapping up one exercise here.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Apologies for being late.
Understood. So here's the next question to you, and that's, when in your life are you the world's worst listener? What prompted those last three questions, and typically, unless somebody wants to volunteer it, I don't usually ask somebody in a large group to kind of answer that question for me out loud. Because my goal here is really not to create embarrassment, but insight. The day that Ray did this exercise 1,000,000 years ago really, really, really affected me personally. And the reason why it did is because I consider myself to be a nice person. I know the jury might be open on this call, but I consider myself to be a nice person. And my thought was, with questions 5 and 6, kind of those characteristics of the world's worst listener, if I consider myself to be a nice person, why would I ever want to create those feelings? Anger, not valued, pissed off, frustrated, discounted, you name it, all the stuff that you guys mentioned. Why would I ever want to create those feelings in another human being? And boy, it really rocked me. I mean, it really did. So that was kind of the prompt, if you will, for the first two questions that are not on the sheet. I am going to ask you, just so we can kind of get the benefit of group learning on this, the last question: when are you the world's worst listener? And I am going to ask you to just kind of share that one with the group, just because we're among friends for the most part. You could smile on that one, Patrice. That one was meant to be my Doug Brown sarcasm. So when are you the world's worst listener? Who wants to get us started?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
When I'm under stress, when I don't have time, stress.
Yeah, I would add when I've overcommitted and I've committed to engage with someone when I know I still have other things that I'm trying to finish up.
Yep.
It never works out right.
Right. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree, Cleveland. If I've got something important that I'm doing, or shush. Good Lord.
Multitasking.
A great example.
Great example. Jeez. Put the phone over there. Anyway, sorry about that. If there's something important that I'm working on or doing or involved in, and somebody's trying to have what I refer to as an inane conversation with me, yes, I am probably the world's worst listener.
And I tend to be a bad listener when I have a lot of distractions, like in the background. You know, if you're rattling paper and you're doing 15 other things, I'm like, I got to cut this off. I can only listen to so much of that. If someone has this really high-pitched voice and they kind of like yell and scream, I cut that out too. So certain times I just turn it off. So when I try, but I can't get to it, you know? So those are times too when I'm a bad listener.
Thank you. Thank you for your candor. Anybody else? Tom?
I see this as an opportunity on occasion. This is an EQ moment. How can we raise, I mean, when our emotions get the better of us, what's happening? To what extent is it happening when you're in an interaction and you become that atrocious listener? What are the emotions in play? What's triggering it? How can you become more aware of it and thereby start to get a handle on self-regulation?
I sort of took that bend, and especially with family, sometimes there'll be a reoccurring conversation. Yeah, after a while, you just think this isn't going anywhere.
Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to ask people who really are in my close circle to, when they call me, ask me if it's a good time or a bad time, and not question when I say bad time, call me back or text. And that makes that whole process a lot easier for me. And if I'm in the middle of something and I can give you 5 minutes, that's all I'm going to give you. If it's going to take longer than that, you're going to have to come back another time. So I don't mind telling people no. I think that sometimes is something that we, if we're on high up here, like I know when I was working on my PhD, my son, would want me to bake some cookies or give him a note for something at school. And I would tell and we both signed a contract that he couldn't ask me for other stuff after 9 o'clock. So we had to find a way to deal with this. So sign this and says, everything you need, you're going to ask me before 9 o'clock. He waited to 8:37, but then, he already had signed the 9 o'clock thing. So that helped us a lot with having boundaries.
That's fast. Anybody else have a comment before I weigh in a little bit?
When I have a bias toward the person, if I feel that they don't know what they're talking about, I'll tend to tune them out.
Thank you. One of the things that to kind of build off of where Patrice was going was the whole idea of it was the combination, as well as stress and overcommitment that got talked about early on. I found that professionally, if I was in the midst of and somebody came in and used that famous phrase that strikes fear in managers' hearts, got a minute, the question that I would routinely ask them back is this an emergency? And if the answer to that question was yes, the pen went down. I literally turned to face them. And I was like a man on a mission. It was just almost like a tunnel between my head and theirs. I was totally focused on what was going to come out of their mouth. If the answer to that question was kind of, sort of, not really, then I would literally go to my calendar. That was the old 2-a-day thing, the old flip calendar, and said, is this the kind of thing that can wait for 90 minutes or something like that? And if they said yes, I put their name in that slot in the calendar, so that they knew that this was not an excuse of, oh, you just don't want to talk to me now. So I wanted to honor the fact that I'm going to talk with them. I just couldn't do it right this second. Because I found that when I didn't do that, the bubble over my head was, how long is this going to go on before I can get done what I really need to get done? And I found myself not really listening to them. I found myself pretending to listen to them. And that's not really honoring. It's not honoring yourself, and it's not honoring them either. So while it may be expedient, it's probably not helpful. In our own sales materials, we talk about running red lights and yellow lights. I never thought I'd have the chutzpah to do this, but I have on more than one occasion, looking a company president right in the eye and saying, I'm under the impression right now that you've got a lot of things that are going on, like in your head right now, and this is probably not the best time for us to talk. Am I correct? And on more than one occasion, I've had people to say back to me, God, I really apologize, but you are so right. right before you walked into the to my office, I got a call from our largest customer who's got an issue with blah 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 blah. Particularly if they knew that I had traveled in from some distance to see them. And I really appreciate it. But yeah, if there's any way that we could, kind of reschedule this meeting, and I literally just get out my calendar, I move the meeting, and that's it. I don't care if I drove, as one case, I drove about 4 hours one way to see somebody. But I could either try to build the relationship, or I could say, damn it, I drove 4 hours to frickin' see you, and you're gonna see me. And in which case I could win the skirmish, but I was not gonna win the war. There's been a couple times when I've called people out, and literally it's really intending in terms of that seeking first to understand. It's not me trying to do any kind of power play at all with them. And they go, oh, I'm so sorry. Yep. And they literally will tend to kind of move around in their chair and kind of reset. And I've had wonderful meetings beyond that. I mean, incredibly productive. But I just found that ignoring what your eyes are telling you is probably not a great idea. So that to me is kind of also kind of in this whole part of communications. So I just wanted to kind of bring those two things in. We were talking before about body language. I don't know when the last time we talked about this, but on the body language, the couple of ones that I really found fascinating is the whole idea of eye contact. And what I found is, and I certainly want to pick the collective brain power of everybody that's on this call for real, but I found that eye contact is really something that varies a lot by ethnicity, nationality, what part of the world you're operating in. And so let me kind of throw that out as an open question. And if you've got your own experiences that you could do kind of a 20-second or a 30-second story that you could relate, I would personally appreciate that. And then we'll go on to a couple other things that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of. I thought I saw Cleveland's head nodding vigorously. So Cleveland, I'm going to give you your shot to kick us off.
Yeah, no, I have worked with many different cultures, races, ethnicities, and there's certain ones, of course, when you are working with people from Asia, typically there's not a lot of straight eye contact, particularly when you're working with females. And they're just ways that you're greeted that you have to be mindful of and not rush over, because that's very important to them. That's my two cents there. Yeah.
Who else has got some multicultural experience that they can kick in?
I've dealt with Asians too, and it's very much like Cleveland described. I mean, there's a rank, and if someone feels that they're a lower rank, you're not going to get a lot of eye contact.
One of the anybody else want to hop in, Dave?
Just I've done a lot of business in Latin America and what have you, and you just have to hit the pause button and understand that you're not going to just get something done. They want to hear about your family. You're looking at lunch, you're looking at dinner, you're looking at an awful long time of getting to know people, and then yes, you will cover business along the way, but it's not going to be that 40 minutes to 1 hour, and we're done. That's not the way it works.
I think the U.S. is the only country that does that.
Yeah.
Everyone else, it's you got to go social first.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah.
There was a question added to the checkbox. What about age difference? Kim works with a lot of folks, a lot of 30-somethings.
Yeah, what I meant by that, I find them to be easily distracted. And I don't know if that's just a chronological thing because they're so social media minded, or it could be something else. So just would love to hear if the group has any experience with that.
Can I jump in here for a second? Rather than viewing lack of eye contact always as a negative, I've had experiences where I might have been talking to someone who happened to be introverted or on the shy side, and so their lack of eye contact is not necessarily a product of what you are saying. It's more internal to them. So, I would just, a cautionary tale, I would just say, don't always judge that under one lens. It may have something to do with their internal process as opposed to what you are saying, if that's the case.
Linda, just to build on that, I feel the same way with crossed arms. That the trigger for me, both with eye contact as well as kind of arm crossing, body language kind of things, is what changed. So if we're talking and you're looking me in the eye and so on, and now all of a sudden your eyes are every place except on me, just keep your antenna up that something changed. Right. Maybe positive, it may be negative, but something changed. It's the same way when it comes to body language. I know people in my life that sit like this all day long forever because it's a really comfortable, it's not that they're overly negative human beings. Of course, all people that sit like this for a long period of time always say that. But if all of a sudden, the conversation is going like this, and I say, and the good news is the price of this is only $15,000 a month, and they do this, there's a high likelihood that they just telegraphed something. So really kind of what changed. And I think if we kind of try to pick up that we're listening with our eyes as much as we're listening to with our ears.
But I will tell you, Doug, as somebody who talks with their hands, that my mom used to make me sit on my hands and try to talk, and I couldn't do that. The crossed arms thing is a counter to that.
That if you cross your arms, you won't talk with your hands?
Right. If I'm doing this, I can't do this.
Got it. From another body language perspective, there's two other things that we have on the body language sheet that's part of if you choose to use it. One is shrugging shoulders. There's two kinds of shrugs. There's this, and that tends to be perceived as negative, as in boredom. But if you're talking with somebody and they start doing this, the quick shrug, high likelihood they're lying to you. So again, just kind of watch what you're seeing.
Could you show me those two again?
Yeah, this is the big shrug. Kind of like, think of a 3-year-old. It typically was some kind of expelling breath and so on. But if you're talking with somebody and they start a quick shrug, kind of almost like a neck twitch, there's a high likelihood they're lying to you.
Doug, I would also interpret that another way. I would interpret the quick shrugs as they've really got something they want to say and they want you to get to the end of your sentence because they're bursting at the seams. But, that's just my interpretation.
Well, it may also be, it's probably one that requires a little bit more research on my part, Linda, because it may be a difference between when they're talking versus when you're talking versus when they're talking. The other thing is everybody familiar with any kind of touching on the side of your nose? Yes, no?
I've heard that. I've heard it said that means you're not telling the truth.
That's absolutely true. in the bulbous part of our nose, we have erectile tissue. And when we lie, the erectile tissue engorges with blood, and it makes the skin itch from the inside out. So people end up talking and rubbing the side of their nose. Now, this is allergy nose. That is. But if you see something doing this, almost guarantee they're lying to you. I got that one from one of our old colleagues, was George Listenby, and he worked in loss prevention. And if they suspected somebody from shoplifting and they brought him in and they started doing this, if they polygraphed him, they flunked almost 100% of the time. It's totally involuntary. So it really is. It's funny when you're talking with people and you ask them a question, say, well, how are things going? Oh, man, nothing could be better. Go, well, guess what? They might as well have blood spurting out of their shoulder in terms of what they're telling you. So just really be aware that that is a real tell. It was actually featured. Listenby sent me, I don't have it anymore, but he actually sent me, the Chicago Trib had done a full-page article on how President Clinton had been taught to keep his hands away from his face when he was talking. And it was, it was like a full Chicago Trib feature, like the second section of the newspaper or something like that. So we have all kinds of things that we can use to our advantage. The other thing is part of the materials talks about intensely listening. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to ask you to write down your answer. You ready? Just listen. So you're a bus driver, and on your bus you have 15 people. You drive 2 blocks, you make a right-hand turn, you go 3 blocks, and you make a left-hand turn. At that point, 2 people get on your bus, and 5 people get off your bus. You proceed, you go straight for another 6 blocks, you make a left-hand turn, you go down 3 blocks, 2 people get on your bus and 1 person get off your bus, and then the bus makes a right, and it goes another 6 more blocks before it gets to the spot where it's going to turn around and reverse. So what I'd like you to write down is the age of the bus driver. And when you have the right answer, would you put your hand up, please? I don't see any hands up yet. So let me tell you the story again. You're a bus driver, and on your bus, you have X number of passengers. So I don't know how many times I actually said you and your in that story, but it was certainly more than once. But chances are you got hooked into the same thing that I did. We were so busy listening for the number of passengers and the right and left turns, we didn't really hear everything that was said, even though I couldn't have said it any more clearly than on your bus you have 15 passengers, right? Think of how many times we selectively listen. We cherry pick what facts we're gonna take out of a sentence. Part of it's natural, part of it's the way we've been trained. But what's the likelihood that we could actually be missing little nuggets along the way because we're not listening as aggressively as we think we're listening? So those were the main things that I typically kind of cover. The other thing, just while we got a couple of minutes before I'll take any other kinds of questions or comments or thoughts. A lot of times, if I'm talking with a group of middle managers or up specifically about communications, so that they don't treat the subject matter lightly, I'll typically ask the question, how many folks, before they ever started reading this or listening to the material or the module, how many people never thought that they were supposed to listen before they started to read and listen to that stuff? Can I agree that that's pretty passé, right? And how many people came as a total shock that a really critical issue in your success as a manager is being able, or and a leader is being able to communicate? How many people were absolutely shocked when they read that? Can we agree the answer is none? So now, if everybody knows that they're supposed to be effective communicators and everybody understands the importance of it, why do we suck at it? And really kind of go into, I literally go the equivalent of pull out a goals planning sheet and say, you know, what's the upside of really being great listeners? What's the downside of not being great listeners? And let's get real. What are the real obstacles to communication here? What are they? No fluff. Let's really let's have a serious discussion about what are the rocks in the road that are really getting in your way here in terms of communication. And then when you start to go into the solutions generation, step, and yeah, we can brainstorm all kinds of things. Sometimes I'll ask them to brainstorm in general. Sometimes I'll ask them to brainstorm against specific obstacles. But I always end the session by saying to somebody, okay, these are all the things that quote unquote we unquote can do. What I want to know is, what are you going to do over the next week or two, depending on the between now and the next session? And I literally ask people, and I go around the room. I mean, I give them time to write it down, but then I literally go around the room and say, okay, Tom, you know, as a result of spending our session today, what are you going to do? And I literally bring it into that public forum for two reasons. I want somebody else to be able to call them out, you know, if they're not, and I want people to be able to support them if they see them trying to make some headway. I want their colleagues and peers to be able to kind of cheer them on along the way. But that to me is what I've been using over the years to really kind of close that knowing doing gap. Because everybody knows they're supposed to communicate. That doesn't mean that they're doing it. So I've got 354. So at this point, let me open this up for comments, questions, and any thoughts that you might have. Did we lose Linda? We lost Linda.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The nose thing is really interesting to me. And I've also been told, and I think I've seen it, where people just generally touch their face. I mean, you're doing it right now, but you know, like maybe grab each cheek with your thumb and your fingers and kind of stroke your chin and that sort of thing. I've seen that or heard that as signs of insincerity.
Of insincerity?
Yeah.
That I can't speak to as much. I don't know. I don't have any firsthand on that one. I will say that this tends to be a sign of boredom.
Mm-hmm.
Hand going up along the cheek. Hand on the fist tends to be a sign of attention. Like I'm in the game. I'm paying attention to what they're doing. One of my own personal tells, and anybody who sat behind me at a power session knows this for sure. If you ever see me do this, I am processing information at the speed of light. Man, is my mind going. I mean, I'm listening. I am so intensely following that conversation. But I didn't even realize I did this until I was sitting with a group of colleagues, and they turned to me and said, "All right, Doug, what are you thinking about? Because you don't go into that position. You never go into that posture unless you're really processing stuff at like 1,000,000 miles an hour." But those are my those are my quick little takes. But I don't have anything in terms of the the insincerity piece directly, Bob. I can certainly see what I can find.
I've heard that though is more of a glancing touch. Also, speeding up your speech suddenly is also a sign of being less than truthful.
Very interesting,
No, it's not.
Charles. No, thank you on that one. So if I all of a sudden I start to talk like the Federal Express guy, you're start to doubt what I'm talking about. That typically happens when I'm down to about 4 minutes to go, and I still have 10 minutes to copy and 4 minutes to go, right, Wendy? Any other comments, observations?
This, Patrice, in answer to the question that he talked about around folks that are in their 30s, sometime adding technology to it, where you give them a survey or something to do online while you're talking to them, or you have them review something that's online, it brings that 30-year-old mind into something that they're comfortable with.
Wow, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments? Well, if you hadn't done the best worst listener before today, I hope it's one of those things that you can add to your war chest. But I got to admit, I've been using it for supervisors, managers, leaders, salespeople, customer service. That's one of the few go-to universal exercises that I use anytime I'm talking about communications.
Great sheet.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions, Tom?
One thing I learned, and I got this from Jay Abraham video I watched years ago, it's more important to be interested than it is to be interesting.
I agree with that.
And he has a great story. It's a guy Jay walks into a bar story, and he's very inquisitive and what have you. And at the end of the conversation, the guy says to him, "I think you're the most interesting person I've ever met." And he thought about it. He goes, "I didn't tell this guy anything. I just asked him a lot of questions because I was curious about his business. But yet somehow he saw me as the most interesting man in the world, right?"
And you didn't even have to have a beer in your hand to get that designation. Got it. Linda, any takeaways from the best listener or worst listener? You're on mute.
Yeah. There's worst listener and best listener. Takeaway, I will refer you to an acronym that Mr. David Herdlinger told to me, which I have told to anybody who will listen, and that's WAIT, W-A-I-T, which is why am I talking? I have shared that with any number of people that it was very impactful for. And I try to keep that in my head a lot.
Got it. I've done the same. I've shared that one more times than I could count. Well, I've got 3:59. Thank you for carving out part of your life to be on the line with us today. It's great to see your faces. God willing, we'll all be together in it's October, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Put that one in your calendar and try to protect it with if possible.
Thank you, Doug.
See you around the neighborhood, everybody.
Much, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.